Hey, shalom, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, call halal Yahweh, Shem Yahushua, Shem Dash. Once again, double honors go out to the apostles and elders, great millstone. The Holy Spirit continue to teach us His truth. All right, this is now I'm out of the DC camp, and earlier I was watching videos and I came upon this information. And, you know, this is nothing new, but it's just another take on, you know, we hear these things about these politicians that constantly coming up with this. Well, we got to have a solution for the border wall and all this, you know, patrolling the border, blah, 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 blah. And this all comes down to the fear of this so-called white man who belongs to the nation of Edom in the Bible. All right. Of him losing his majority, him being weeded out. There's a local here, she's dead now, but Dr. Frances Cress Welling, all right? And she used to talk about this thing. It's fear of being, what's the word that she used? Genetically, the fear of genetic annihilation, all right, the phrase, all right? And that's just it. You see, you know, the smallest little thing that you know, ultimately it's that ancient hatred between Jacob, his descendants, and the nation of Esau. When you understand that, you know, you understand it goes back further than that, all right? But yeah, the descendants of Jacob and the descendants of Esau being at war with one another, all right? These Edomites, they sold their birthright. They're mad, all right? And especially now they see things are spinning out of control. They're no longer able to maintain their grip on power that they've had so long because they can sense that, hey, their time is short, Revelation 12 and 12, all right? So they've done things throughout, especially here in this country, because you got to know, you got to realize you have a nation that's still in subjection to another nation here in the Americas, all right? So this comes down to control. How do we keep controlling the population? Well, we know that if you remember the Willie Lynch thing, you turn them against each other. You got the light skin against the dark skin. You got the man against the woman, and they perfected that one, all right? And other little things, all right? It's all about control. And then you get to the period of Margaret Sanger and the eugenics, which leads me back to this. In this book, look at the prices. This is where you know it's a good one. All right. It says the birth dearth. What happens when people in free countries don't have enough babies? This is the hardcover. And he wrote this in 1987, or at least it was released. All right. See here, it says hardcover, $936. 3 used from $936. So, hey, crazy, isn't it? But here's the thing. Let's go ahead and play the video from, everyone should recognize this lady here. And she's going to, hey, she's good at what she does. Here we go.
Now, white people are really frightened. If you don't understand the destruction of Planned Parenthood offices, and you don't understand the wall that we're going to build on the southern border of the United States, you haven't read the book, The Birth Dearth by Ben Wattenberg. Ben Wattenberg was a brilliant Jewish man who was a member of the American Enterprise Institute, and he wrote a book, the first paragraph of which says, "The main problem confronting the United States today is there aren't enough white babies being born in this country." He was an advisor to presidents of the United States. He wrote the book in 1987. He says if we don't change this and change it rapidly, white people will lose their numerical majority in this country, and this will no longer be a white man's land. Now, I'm not misrepresenting this. I'm telling you exactly, almost exactly what he says. He says there are three things we can do to solve this. Number one, we could pay women to have babies, as they have been doing in Western European nations for years. Then he says, and these are his words, not mine, unfortunately, we would have to pay women of all colors to have babies, so we don't want to do that. He says the second thing we could do is increase the number of legal immigrants that are allowed into this country every year. Then once again he says, unfortunately, the vast majority of those wanting to come to this country today are people of color, so we don't want to do that. The third thing he says, and women had better pay attention to this, 60% of the fetuses that are aborted every year are white. If we could keep that 60% alive, that would solve our birth dearth. Does that sound like racism to you?
Can you talk a little bit about the trauma associated with?
The trauma associated with it?
Yeah.
One of the main traumas is it tells white people that they are superior because of the lack of melanin in their skin. And then they find out suddenly that we've got a black president. That's traumatic. That's where the trauma is. Living a lie, finding out the truth is traumatic. Finding out now, recently, that within 30 years, white people will be in the numerical minority in this country is going to be traumatic. White people are scared to death right now, particularly white males. They're scared to death that they are going to lose their power in the future. And they are. But if you want to get ready for the future, if you want to be treated well in the future, treat others well in the present. What we do in the present constructs the future. We called the Japanese, and you'll pardon me, but this is what we called them, slant-eyed little yellow We didn't say that about the Germans. After the war, we rebuilt Germany and Japan. And we get along beautifully with the Japanese. That was in 1945 that we finally won that.
I want you to please pay particular close attention to what she's about to say, all right? Because she's going to go in, and this is something that we, since we have been blessed to have our eyes open, you look at Jake still in that, low state, and you're like, how could you, after what everything this devil has done, and because of that Christian philosophy, doctrine, all right, you don't understand, our people don't understand that was done on purpose, all right? It doesn't teach you to fear the Most High, and it also strips away your ability, more or less, to recognize that you have enemies.
That war. How many years ago was that? Figure that out quickly.
I'm not a math person, but
You're not a math person, but you know it wasn't that far.
Right.
And it didn't take 50 years for us to have peace with the Japanese and the Germans, even though we dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan. The Japanese hadn't killed 10 million people. Nowhere near that. We didn't drop any bombs on Germany, any atomic bombs on Germany. They were a different kind of people. We couldn't afford to do that. We killed how many Japanese people with 2 atomic bombs? And they forgave us. You want to talk about forgiveness? You want to talk about changing this thing? I cannot understand how Japanese people can stand the sight of any of us, and yet they do. I cannot understand why black people who have been subjected to the ugliness that they've been subjected to in this country can get up every morning and go to work among us and not be absolutely furious. And I don't understand why we allow white people to behave the way they do. I don't understand that. And my third graders, after they'd gone through the exercise, couldn't understand it and wouldn't tolerate it. And when they went up to junior high, and a junior high teacher used the N-word, one of my former students said, if you're going to use that word, I'm going to go out in the hall until you stop using it, because we don't use that word in this school. That was a 7th grader who told his teacher off. When we have enough students who are willing to confront people who are making racist, sexist, ageist, homophobic statements, we're going to be better off. We have got to stop tolerating the intolerable. If it's intolerable for my black cousins, and every black person on this earth is one of my cousins, if it's intolerable for them, it's intolerable for me. I will not tolerate it. I will not tolerate it. That is not, that, I am required not to tolerate that kind of treatment for the people who are related to me. And that's every person on the face of the earth. If your ignorance is such that you will mistreat somebody because of your ignorance about the color of their skin, don't do it around me. Number one, I've been threatened with death lots of times. Now I say, go for it, fool. My husband died 4 years ago. Being with him would not be a bad thing for me. Death is not the worst thing that can happen to you. Living a worthless, useless life is much worse than dying.
And at that point there, you know, uh, that's another good point because that's going into the curses, all right, on these devils, these Edomites, all right. That old expression, what makes you laugh, make it cry, all right. When these curses, that's Deuteronomy 30 and 7, are transferred over to him, all right. These, what was a blessing is going to become a curse. All right, this is Deuteronomy. This is restoration promise to the Israelites. This is Deuteronomy 30 and 7. It says, "And the Most High Yahweh thy power will put all these curses upon thine enemies and on them that hate thee, which persecuted thee." Okay, and like I said, that's blessing. Let's go to that. What's what? Let's go to Genesis 27 chapter. Jacob's deception. All right. But you got to remember, in the spirit, this was done in the spirit. All right. This is, let's see where I want to start. 38. All right. All right, wait a minute. Let me start up. Okay, that's where they call it deception, but you got to remember, like I said, this was done in the spirit. Now, let me go ahead and read this and I'll explain that. And this is Genesis chapter 27, verse 38. It says, "And Esau said unto his father, Hast thou but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, Behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth." All right, he will have the best of everything. Don't you see that? "And of the dew of heaven from above, and by thy sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother." His blessing is the sword. All right, weapons of war. All right, whether they be uh, biological warfare, chemical warfare, nuclear, whatever. The gun, the sword, everything. It's parabolic. All right, it says, "And it shall come to pass when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck." And Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, "The days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then will I slay my brother Jacob." All right, and he's been doing that ever since. All right, now what I meant earlier about this is being done in the spirit. If this had been as so-called white people, the Edomites, like to portray it as, well, you stole the blessing. You know, that was back in the 25th chapter. But with this here, you got to consider what is the state of the earth now. He has been allowed to do what he has done since, you know, the Renaissance period. All right, and then he, of course, you got to look at the state of the earth. All right, he in effect was allowed to exercise that blessing, and look what he has done, proving that he wasn't worthy of it to begin with. All right, so you can scratch that off. All right, it's just his nature. All right, let's see. Now, let's go back to this devil here, Ben Wattenberg. All right, as you saw here, the book is $936. Let's look at some of the comments, because others have done reports on books like Nature Knows No Color Lines, the big one by Ronald Sanders, A about he started out trying to prove that the Native Americans were not Israelites, and he ended up doing so. All right. Um, Books of that nature, they are usually really high, and there's a reason for it. And this is straight to the point. This is Richard, and he says, amazing book on European racism. March of this year, he says, great information. It's expensive because they don't want the poor people reading it. All right. Lloyd Wilson says this book is priced ridiculously high to minimize dissemination of the information therein contained. Censorship. All right. Amazon customer said really want to read, but $463, so he found a better price, less than half. All right. Let's see. Well, actually, right at half. So it says great read, and the book came on time. I really want to read this book, but $4.99, too expensive. Doug Erlandson. And this guy here is making a case for this guy being right, all right, about population control and all that. So, but in any case, yeah. Now, let's go real quick for time's sake. Black America before LBJ, how the welfare state inadvertently helped ruin black communities. But was it inadvertent? Now, there's been many or much speculation to the fact that LBJ was a crypto Jew, meaning a secret Jew. They changed their names and all that, so everybody just thought he was a good old boy, backslapping, tobacco chewing, good old boy from Texas. Now we know for certain that his wife was Lady Bird. All right. It says Ronald Reagan said we waged a war on poverty and poverty won. It says the dust has settled and evidence is in. The 1960s Great Society and War on Poverty programs of President LBJ have been a colossal and giant failure. All right. It says one might make the argument that social welfare programs are the moral path for a modern government. They cannot, however, make the argument that these are in any way effective at alleviating poverty. All right. In fact, there's evidence that such aggressive programs might make generational poverty worse. All right. Skip down for time's sake. I'll just put it in the description box, but it brings up some questions here, and it says, what is the Great Society and the War on Poverty? What were the goals of the Great Society? The breakdown of the black family, black participation in the labor market, black business ownership, the decline in black home ownership, which way forward for the black community. All right. Good point, because it was a concerted effort on keeping us, with redlining and all that, especially when you consider the veterans, World War I, World War II, especially with the GI Bill. I know a lot of our people still cannot take advantage of that. Owning a home, all right, that can that's a very big deal. Property ownership and all that, all right. But in every aspect, we were cut out, and it was it was done intentionally. It wasn't by accident. All right, but his Great Society, he was trying to pick up where FDR left off with his New Deal. All right. Let's see. He says there are 4 primary initiatives of the War on Poverty. You have the Economic Opportunity Act, and this led to the Job Corps and Community Action Program. You had the Food Stamp Act of 1964. This created a food stamp program that remained largely in place until Bill Clinton ended welfare as we know it. At this time, food stamps were open-ended and could, in theory, be a means of feeding a family for life. You got to consider, too, before President Eisenhower with his uh, interstate highway um, construction, which further segregated Jake on purpose. All right. But before that, you had what? The projects. And that's just what it was, the project. It was a project. All right. It says 3 is Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1964. All right. It said it sought to level an alleged achievement gap in public education. It has been reauthorized by both Democratic and Republican presidents under the names Improving America's Schools Act of 1994, No Child Left Behind Act of 2004. That was with W. Bush, and the Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015. And then number 4 is the Social Security Act of 1965, which created both Medicare and Medicaid. All right. It says the Economic Opportunity Act in particular was insidious in that it gave broad leeway to create programs without congressional approval or oversight. An example of this is the Head Start program, which is shown to have only extremely limited and short-term effects on the ability of children to succeed in public schools. All right. It says the Great Society refers to a far broader set of programs, some of which still exist today, others of which were casualties of both the massive budget for the Vietnam War. LBJ's other pet project, as well as a passage of time in subsequent Republican administrations. All right. And it gets into the goals. All right. Here's something else. This is a report estimated that 1.6 million Americans lack access to quote unquote clean water. Clean here being a weasel word that is undefined. Even if we took this 1.6 million figure at face value, which we should not, this means that approximately 0.48% of all Americans, for example, less than half of 1%, do not have access to clean water. It's how they play with the numbers and do their tricks, and it plays on people's minds. It says, in the absence of significant poverty conditions to attack, the war on poverty was largely about hitting a moving target subjectively defined as having less than some other people. It says, despite the best intentions, to which it should be noted the road to hell is paved with, the Great Society was bound to fail simply because there were no clear targets. In this sense, the war on poverty prefigured other government wars on abstract concepts such as the war on drugs and the war on terror. Those are abstract concepts. The war on drugs was a war on our people. All right. And the war on terror, again, just to generate money through war. All right. Oh, man. So, and of course, hey, the breakdown of the black family. All right. This is from Thomas Sowell, the quote. He says, the black family, which had survived centuries of slavery and discrimination, began rapidly disintegrating in the liberal welfare state that subsidized unwed pregnancy and changed welfare from an emergency rescue to a way of life. And this is what I've said so many times, because our people get caught up in that dynamic between Republican and Democrat. Neither of them are for us. They just have different strategies in keeping us down. And this one, from the liberal side of it, is that give them more rope to hang themselves strategy. Give them more rope. Yeah, listen. All right. You think they're helping you. That's not their intent. All right. Oh. It says the biggest problem resulting from the Great Society is the breakdown of the black family. This is a sensitive subject, but one that must be broached to fully understand the devastating impact that the Great Society has had on the black community in the United States. And without going into all this, one of the big ones, they say, out of wedlock birth. Okay. Yeah, but Oh, that feminism is the big one. This is not something that it's like, what reason did our women have to get into that other than being, uh, I mean, this is something that, like I said, it's a sensitive subject, but all these years since, it's always been the black man's fault. No, it was the woman that left, and she got swayed by this feminism, and that feminism was, the black woman wanting more than what her, the white woman wanting more than what her white man was wanting to give. She wanted to be equal to him. That didn't have anything to do with us. That was a problem between so-called white people, but she had to uh, get involved with that, and we really crashed after that. All right, and now you got all these monsters that are being raised in a single female-led household, and they're emotional uh, wrecks. All right, and now they're complaining, but hey, you said you could do it all by yourself. You raised these monsters. Now what? Oh man. And like I said, the war on drugs was another thing that it did, was got uh, the fathers out of the household aside from welfare. But now the father's in jail, all right, or strung out on drugs or dead. So yeah, that had a devastating effect. Uh, like I said, this is not our rest. This is never meant for us. They get these think tanks, and they get in there and they come up with all these strategies to screw us over. All right, this is Psalms 11. The Lord, the Most High Yahweh, a refuge and defense. All right, and that's just all this is. It's they, oh, man. It says to the chief musician, a psalm of David. In the Most High Yahweh put I my trust, not these evil, wicked people that have it out for us. How say ye to my soul, flee as a bird to your mountain? For lo, the wicked bend their bow, they make ready their arrow upon a string, that they may privily shoot at the upright in heart. Like I said, all these think tanks, all these groups like the CFR, um, the Bilderbergs, all this shit, Psalms 83 again, they're doing everything to keep us from becoming a nation again. It says, if the fountains be destroyed, what can the righteous do? The Most High Yahweh is in his holy temple. The Most High Yahweh's throne is in heaven. His eyes behold, his eyelids try the children of men. Verse 5, the Most High Yahweh trieth the righteous, but the wicked and him that loveth violence his soul hateth. Verse 6, upon the wicked he shall rain snares, fire and brimstone, and an horrible tempest. This shall be the portion of their cup. All right. Now I said Psalms 83. Let's go there real quick. It says, the Most High implored to confound his enemies. All right, let's start at 2. It says, for lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance, for they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. And it gives our enemies the first one, the tabernacles of Edom, the so-called white man, and the Ishmaelites, those dirty Arabs of Moab, the so-called Chinese, and the Hagarenes, Hamites. All right. Oh man. So see, this is, yeah, you want to talk about conspiracy? That's what these scriptures here are about. There is a conspiracy. There's always been a conspiracy. So don't get thrown off by that word. All right. So that's it. Back to this asshole here, Ben Wattenberg. Uh, but anyway, yeah, I'll of course put all of these links in the description box, and you can read them at your leisure. Okay, so once again, we were looking at this video here about Miss Jane Elliott, and she was going in on, you know, these Edomites, these so-called white people. It's fear that's motivating them. Of course, outright hatred too, but they know they're losing their power. All right, so yeah, like I said, for time's sake, I'm sure I've gone well over my time, but as I always say, hopefully whoever views this is edified as to what's going on. You know, this is what we do here at Great Millstone. We link things and filter them through the scriptures, world events, so that after you get the understanding, you will realize too that, hey, time is growing shorter and shorter and shorter. So if you're on the fence, all right, you got to make up your mind, all right? And always for the Akim out there on the highways and byways that are, you know, spreading the truth in all sincerity, all right, hey, salutation to you, you know, shalom. And with that, once again, double honors go out to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Hey, shalom.